Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. We will wait until everybody joins. And we will start with this new webinar organized in this case by EACEA as part of EDEN and framed within the European Open and Digital Learning Week, which is happening all these days in Europe, but with collaboration also from other regions in the world, like we have today in this webinar. And today we will focus on renewable assignments. And the idea is to share with you, well, first a brief approach to the concept and then current practices happening in higher education. As you know, in the EDEN NAP, we have a focus on practice and linking theory and practice. So we thought this was a very relevant topic, as you will see. Today, we will be four speakers. I am the moderator as well, and I am a member of the EDEN NAP, a professor at the Faculty of Education at UNED, the distance education in Spain. And I am Inés Gil-Jaurena, and we have Colum Foley from Dublin City University in Ireland, and a team composed by Jennifer Van Allen and Stacy Katz from Lehman College at City University of New York in the US. And so it's really great to have you both. And first, I would like to introduce the concept of renewable assignments, because maybe some of you are not so familiar with it. And I would like to frame it within the broader open education movement, OER, open educational practices. And just to frame a bit more, if we go to the UNESCO recommendation on OER back in November 2019, you all know what OER are, and I copied the definition there. But also in this recommendation, beyond OER, there is a claim and statement and advocacy for using pedagogical initiatives that go beyond a classical way of teaching and especially engage educators and learners in more active learning, and also understand students are producers or creators of content. And this has a lot to do with renewable assignments. Also, I recommend you this paper by Michael Paskevicius, and he identified different aspects of open educational practices that are also very, very relevant and keys for understanding the path towards renewable assignments. And especially it's the how open educational practices also affect and involve changes in the design of assessment and evaluation, which is will be the focus for today's webinar. And specifically, the term renewable assignments was first approached and coined the term by David Wiley in the last decade. He has been working along also with John Hilton III or III, I don't know how you say that, and they have somehow conceptualized and made different statements about renewable assignments. And especially recommend you these two articles. One is a blog, it's a blog entry, and the other one is a paper in a scientific journal. The thing is that they somehow confront or see an evolution or on taking advantage of traditional or disposable assignments. That's how they call them. These are the usual assignments that every teacher uses. And it is any assignment that students develop, and it's only both of them who really have access to that content. So it's an objective in itself to fulfill the assignment and to mark it. But from an open education perspective, it's possible to take advantage and see some more opportunities on that content. And this is what renewable assignments are about. And it's interesting how they establish it's somehow a continuum of different approaches from disposable assignment to a renewable assignment, considering different aspects that they translated into questions. So these are the questions that we can bear in mind when our colleagues share today the practices they have developed in their respective universities. And all of them involve a basic, which is common to disposable assignment, that is that students do something or develop a product or an artifact from just, I don't know how to say that in English, like new, totally original, or from an OER. It could be any of them. But we wanted to share with you some experience that go beyond that and can be at any step in this continuum. For instance, if the artifact has some value beyond supporting the individual learning, so beyond being an essay or a video or something that only the teacher marks, but it can have an impact also on the learning of other students, etc., then we have moved some step forward. And we have also examples today that have reached the last step, which is the students' created artifacts are openly licensed or can be considered strictly as OER. So I won't go any longer in my presentation, and I will leave the room to our presenters in this order. First, Colum Foley will share his experience at DCU Dublin City University in Ireland. And then Jennifer Van Allen and Stacy Katz will share their different works. They have been working together, so they are a team in this presentation. And they have published some papers also about renewable assignment that I really encourage you to read. And thank you very much for joining us. So let's go ahead, and please, Colum, when you want. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. And thank you, Inés, for inviting me to share our practice in Dublin City University. We've been looking at this area for quite a while and trying to come up with different ways that we can use, particularly video, in promoting different types of assessment. So as Inés said, my name is Dr. Colum Foley. I currently work as a management professor in Dublin City University Business School, but I've been teaching online for best part of 20 years in the open education unit in Dublin City University. So what I'm going to talk about today, reusable assignments in assessment, and there are three particular modules that I want to share a practice with you on. The first one is MT583. It's a postgraduate operations management module. The second one is MT314. It's an undergraduate project management module. And the third one is MT5219, a postgraduate dissertation module. And I'm sure we'll have time for a bit of discussion and questions at the end. So looking at the first module that we sort of piloted with, and as I said, it's an operations management module. It's a postgraduate module. And students were tasked to source module-related video material. And that material, we were looking for them to illustrate innovation in operations or in sustainable practices. So the first iteration of this task, when we did it first, no marks were awarded for the submission, although a prize was awarded for the best submission. But the absence of actual marks meant that only 41% of the students submitted. So we thought again. And in the second iteration, we gave 5% of total assignment marks for that task, and that resulted in 100% submission. In the third iteration, then we held on to we retained the 5% marks, and again 92% submitted. In each cohort, the top submissions were filtered, and we asked the students in the actual class to vote for what they thought were the best videos that everybody submitted. The assignment can be reused, specifying the video chosen must have been created in the last 12 months. We divided out the gender balance of the submissions, and really there was nothing significant in that, but we thought there might be. So the advantages that we found from doing things this way was students peer assessed one another's selection. They each viewed and discussed quite a range of interesting topics, because they were looking at everybody's video to see which was the best and what they had unearthed that was different from what they'd actually found themselves. It also enables students to critically evaluate video material as it was presented. And the whole exercise meant that students group sourced valuable learning materials that that we could use and reuse in illustrating points within the particular module on an ongoing basis. The disadvantages are, I suppose, lessons learned from the exercise was that while some of the selections were interesting, they weren't really to the topic, they were off topic. And then, of course, the gremlins came into effect when I tried to play the best videos in a scheduled class. Some of them didn't play, so we've had some tech issues here this morning as well. So as a plan B then, students were asked to nominate their favorites on our VLE. It's called Loop, but it's a Moodle-based VLE in the next class, but many actually didn't do so. And when they did vote, there was a tie for the best selection. The other thing that I learned to my cost in terms of setting it up was that I didn't specify that they should keep the videos to 5 minutes. So I was getting some selections that were 20 minutes or 15 minutes, and to go through that many videos of a specific length for a large class is very time consuming. So I learned that lesson on the second iteration and specified that the video must be limited to 5 minutes. So here is an example of one of the submissions. We probably just have pictures but not sound, but let's give it a go and see what happens. So this is a video submitted that demonstrates reuse of what would become landfill in the past, but is now being used in a productive way and recycled in fitting with the theme that we have here. It just gives you a taster of the type of thing that our students did submit. So the next module that I want to talk to you about is MT314. It's a project management module, and it's service to undergrad final year program students. And typically there's between 200 and 400 students on that module. Their task was to submit an individual reflection of 5 minutes or less on a group assignment that they'd done using Unicam or similar technology. We didn't specify that it had to be a particular technology, but we did make Unicam available to them. So they either had a choice to submit the oral submission or to submit a written submission of 500 words. There were 25 marks available for that, 25% of the exam available for that. Again, the percentages of people who opted to do the oral presentation, 5%, 10%, and less than 1% of the third iteration. No significant split between whether males or females submitted. So the task objective in this case was to do an individual reflection on how a group worked on an assignment. They were to compose a reflection on how this student thinks their group actually performed. So they're taking into account what everybody else contributed really to their group success. The advantages of doing it this way was that the assignment can be reused. It's a unique individual reflection that's difficult to plagiarize. Some students actually perform better in an oral test. The task improves communication skills, and it's a novel approach to assessment. The disadvantages are lessons learned. Some students weren't able to access the Unicam instructions. Some files were too big. So we quickly learned that if they could just provide us with a Google Drive link to that particular video, that sort of got over the problem. And the other thing, of course, was that students had to write the piece anyway. So from their point of view, it was more time consuming. But you can see here two of the participants and what their videos sort of looked like from a static photograph point of view. Nadia is an international athlete and Jake has now pursued a career in communications. And the third one that we looked at was MT5219. It's a postgraduate dissertation capstone module at the end of a master's program. In this case, students were required to submit a reflection in video format. Everybody had to submit in video format on their work, detailing their methods, their findings, and their conclusions. From our point of view, it offered the opportunity to assess oral presentation skills, a criteria measured to meet AOL Assurance of Learning standards recorded as part of the EACEA accreditation process that we were involved in at the time. Previously, this was done in real time online. So what we found was, again, we gave students the option of recording in any way that they saw fit, and largely it was Unicam, PowerPoint, and a variety of other recording sources. The advantage is, in this case, students can complete the task at their own leisure. Markers can correct or grade to their own timetable, and they can easily compare one video with the rest. Students can improve their presentation skills, and markers can assess oral presentation skills. In terms of the disadvantages or the lessons learned, markers don't have the opportunity to question the students on what it is that they're presenting. Students, from a student point of view, students must master the technology or phone a friend. And really, it takes time to get it right. So it was time consuming from the student's point of view. So really that's, here's an example now, evaluating the operation of our health services national cold chain from a stakeholder's point of view during COVID. So this particular Mary Dowling, this particular student was working in the area of distribution of vaccines across the country, and she did an assessment of that, and her assessment, her dissertation, was captured in video and presented to us. So really, that's what we've done. We've done a project management reflection, an operations management selection of videos, and a postgraduate dissertation presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Go raibh maith agat. And I'll pass you back to Inés.
Thank you very much, Colum, for presenting your experience and highlighting also the benefits and difficulties or disadvantages you found. I think that's very useful. And if there is any specific question about these experiences that Colum just shared, please do them now. If not, we will have some time for discussion on, or more general maybe questions at the end after the other presentation. And please use the chat, or there is also a place to place questions just for the panelists. And also, if you have I'm interested in knowing if this is a new concept for you, for the audience, or if you have already experience with renewable assignments. If you want to share them in the chat, that's fine. So thank you, Colum. And let's move to Jennifer Van Allen and Stacy Katz from Lehman College at New York. Thank you.
All right, can everyone see my screen okay? Okay. So thank you so much. It's really nice to be here. It's morning for Jennifer and myself since we're calling in from New York. And just to give a little bit of background, So Jennifer and I are both faculty at Lehman College. I'm a librarian. Jennifer is in education. The City University of New York has been involved in open education formally since about 2016. There were obviously people doing multiple different things with open access and open access textbooks before then, but starting in about 2015, 2016, there was a grant through Achieving the Dream for zero cost pathways at some of our community colleges. The City University of New York is made up of 25 campuses, and Lehman College is one of the senior colleges. So we offer a 4-year degree. And so in about 2016, we started working on open educational resources through initiative funds from our provost at the time. And then in 2017, the governor of New York actually offered New York State universities through the SUNY and CUNY system. The SUNY is State University of New York. CUNY is the City University of New York, $4 million each. And that's been going since 2017, that we've received funding towards OER and towards zero cost pathways. But recognizing that OER and zero cost offers more benefits than just the cost issue. Like, the cost issue is really important for us. Our students actually at the City University of New York, 40% of them make under $20,000 a year in their households, which is a really staggering number when you think of the cost of living in New York. But we also want the pedagogy to be engaging, relevant, and, you know, a way that our students can really relate to the content. So that's led to more renewable assignments and thinking more critically about what it is we're doing in open. So Jennifer, if you want to go ahead and start sharing about your specific course, but that's sort of a little bit of the background of how the initiative started, and how Jennifer and I connected.
Yeah, so as Stacy said, I am a teacher educator. I teach in our literacy education program, and one of the classes that I thought would fit really well with this work, because I wanted to introduce my students, they are all practicing teachers. So it's a graduate program, an advanced certification program for their teacher certification. As practicing teachers, I want them to be aware of OER so that they can use it with their K-12, their PK-12 or pre-K through high school students. And they can start, I mean, education is all about sharing. We always share materials with each other as educators. And so introducing them to formal systems that they can find resources that they can freely adapt, share with others, remix, and even create their own, so that there's more knowledge sharing in the world. So that's kind of the background of this particular course. And will you go to the next slide, please? So the renewable assignment in this course, it's a language literacy and educational technology course. And I thought it fit really well because within the course, we talk about the ethics of sharing copyrighted material, looking at open source material. And so I thought it fit really well with this. Now in fall of 16, I had this assignment as an inquiry project, where part of the goals of the course are for them to think about all these technologies and digital literacy that we've talked about and basically integrate it into their classroom. So in fall of 2016, I positioned this final culminating assignment for the course as an inquiry project, where they created a unit plan, an inquiry-based, problem-based unit plan for their grade level that they're teaching in. And as part of that, they needed to integrate technology in meaningful ways, whether it was work that students were producing or how they were presenting the content to students as well. And so that's kind of how it started. So this assignment was really just focused on their own practice in their own classrooms. And it was constructivist in that, and it kind of met the low criteria for a renewable assignment because they were implementing this unit in their own classrooms as well. But thinking, how can we build on this? When I started learning about open pedagogy and learning about renewable assignments, how can I build on this? So now it's not just something that they're doing in their classroom, but it's something that that they are interacting with a global community and creating a renewable assignment. So I shifted the assignment slightly in fall of 2019 and reiterated it again in fall of 2021 using lessons learned throughout, and am actually reiterating it again this semester in fall of 2023 as a renewable assignment. So rather than forcing them to design an inquiry or problem-based unit, I opened it up and said it can be anything, as long as you're showing me how you integrate technology and develop students' digital literacies and new literacies in your classroom. So I opened it up. It can be a learning module. It could be a lesson plan or an inquiry unit. It can even be a collection of technological resources and how they envision these being used in classrooms, exemplar models of projects that they might do as students. So I opened it up so it can be virtually anything. And I also invited them to take a look at some of the PK-12 repositories of open educational materials, and in there they can create something from scratch, or they're able to go in, pull an existing OER and adapt it, remix it in ways that will fit the assignment requirements and the objectives of the assignment and their own unique classes. So in that way, it is no longer just for themselves. It is something that they're taking from a community, and they are invited at the end. I don't require them, but I do invite them to share it more broadly, either back on one of the repositories or at the very least in a class folder that everybody can pull from that enters into this course eventually. So here's how it went. In fall of 2019, I had 9 candidates enrolled in the class. In order to teach them about OER, Stacy and I co-taught a class about OER, showing them the repository, showing them how to get into it, how to search for information or search for usable materials for their classroom. They also received asynchronous instruction on how to apply a Creative Commons license to their work. So they learned about the different Creative Commons licenses and how to upload that to a repository. In the first iteration, they submitted the resource that they created and a reflection on how their implementation went in their classroom. They submitted that together. And so we collected a little bit of data on that just to see students' responses and see what happened. So in both iterations, we looked at the artifacts that the students created. We submitted or asked them to participate in a survey. And in fall of 19, we did interviews with 4 of these candidates, 2 who chose to share openly and 2 who did not choose to share openly, to kind of understand, how did you perceive this assignment? Did it help you? Was it empowering to you as an educator, as a student? And why did you choose to share, or why did you not choose to share it openly? So using what we learned from phase 1 in fall of 2021, reiterated the assignment, this time with more candidates. There were 19 candidates in the class at that one, or at that iteration. And we revised it just a little bit based on what we learned, the implementation. So we still devoted 1 class period to OER, and that was taught with Stacy and I, but we had them go in and explore and evaluate resources a little bit more. We had them go into OER Commons, was the repository that we use since it seems to have the most K-12 materials. And there was less emphasis in this time on the copyright and licenses and more on this concept of OER. And you'll see why on the next slide. We also built in more opportunities for ongoing feedback and revision of their object that they were creating. I gave them feedback, so they submitted a draft, and for submitting a complete draft, they got full points on the assignment, but they also got feedback from me as well on the object that they were creating, and they were given the opportunity to revise and resubmit after implementation. The assignment was broken up into 2 parts this time, first with the resource and then another on the reflection. And then there was a class that was devoted to licensing decisions. So rather than emphasizing so much of the Creative Commons licenses in that first class, it was more about what OER are, why we engage with OER, and then the second class, there was a tutorial on how to upload their resource into an open space. So
and I would also just add, Jennifer, that you teach the course with OER, so the students up to this point have learned from OER and have seen the licenses, but hadn't quite registered until we have the class session, what those are.
Yep. So what did they create? And you can see here these just what licensing did they choose, or how did they create their object? So from the first semester, and these were fairly similar across, most students chose to create their own brand new resource in both fall 19 and fall of 2021. A couple chose to adapt existing resources, and a couple chose to remix each semester. So those numbers are the same, but what I thought was really interesting is from fall of 2019 to fall of 2021, in fall of 2019, 67% of the class did not share it openly. They only shared their resource within the class environment. But in fall of 2021, the way we reiterated the instruction on OER, 50% chose to only share it with the class, and 50% of the class chose to share it openly with an open license. And I think that was due to how we reiterated the content and more opportunities to share. And we'll talk more about that, but it was really interesting. I thought that what they really seem to hang on to is a lot of these candidates use teachers pay teachers for teaching resources. And so they're paying $1, $5 for resources. And so they really latch on to this idea that teachers sharing with each other is helpful. And they like that OER is not for profit. So you'll see that represented here, that a lot of the candidates choose an NC license on their work when they do choose to share it, because they really appreciate that environment of like sharing. And so one brought up in class just the other day that she thinks that all educational materials should be freely available to everyone. And she's like, this is exactly what we need everywhere. So they really do appreciate that. Will you go on to the next slide, please? So here's some examples, and I'll put some in the chat as well, links to the resources. These are all objects that were shared openly. The first one, ocean garbage patches, is one that this student chose to upload it into OER Commons. A lot of them just choose to share within a shared Google Drive folder, but do openly license their work. So the first one is a project-based learning unit that really took on a life of its own. This student was looking at ocean garbage patches and pollution, and it was for a 5th grade class. She was going in, she didn't have her own classroom, so she was going in and co-teaching it with another teacher in a classroom she had worked with previously. And the goal was to help the students create presentations, right? That was the ultimate goal of this project. It turned into something a lot more. The kids got really, really into it, and they ended up purchasing like the rubber bracelets for a cause and selling those and like raising money. Like the project took on a life of its own. They were creating flyers to post in the hallways about garbage in the ocean. They were creating podcasts. So these kids took it from a presentation, which was the goal of the unit, into something that really lasted the entire school year after the project. So it was really interesting to see that. And the teachers were really excited about the work that the students produced. Another object that a student produced is this 1st grade mathematics, addition and subtraction. And this is a book chapter that she decided to create it for a flipped classroom, where she would send this home, and as part of the homework each night, students would read the lesson with their parents. There's instructional videos that support the parents in learning how to do these things. And that was the homework. So then kids would come in and into the class kind of with this content knowledge already, and she would engage them in practice. In the traditional homework, they would do problems in class, they would work them together, and the parents really appreciated it because they were learning how to do it right along with their students with their children through this book chapter. And there's another one I put in the chat. It was a kind of an end of unit assessment on that a student, they were reading this chapter book for kids because of Winn-Dixie, and the students as part of this project, pretended they took on roles of the characters and talked through, like, interviewing like the characters from the book. Somebody took on the interviewer, and then the other kids would take on the characters and answer questions based on that character and what they learned. So lots of different projects that have been created. So here's what we found over the 2 iterations, and I expect similar results now. Overall, our candidates developed an awareness of OER. Up until this point, many of them had no idea that OER existed. So through this project, in their reflections, they all demonstrated that they understood what OER are, they understand what CC licensing allows as a layer on top of copyright. Now, although that awareness was developed, they were still struggling a bit with the different CC licenses, the Creative Commons licenses, which is one of the barriers that we found from the first iteration, that they were so uncomfortable with the licenses, they didn't know what to choose. So that's part of the reason that so many chose not to share it openly. So in the second iteration, there were fewer that said that they were still struggling to understand the licensing, but that was still present. Next slide. We also found that they, across both iterations, they demonstrated really positive beliefs about OER, and they think that these resources are really powerful for their work, for the potential. They love that they can go in, they can find free resources to use in their classroom, and know that they can adapt it to their students' needs. They really also saw value in sharing their work with others. So many, even the ones that didn't choose to share openly, said, I really like that other teachers can see my work and can build on it and can take it and use it with their students in different ways. So I feel like I'm contributing to this larger community, or I'm participating in this larger community. So in some ways, they saw that OER is useful for their practice and helps them become part of a global community as well. Next slide.
One piece that I really like in this also, it was on the last slide, was just the hearing from the students, why aren't our programs teaching us about this? Why are education programs not incorporating OER as a place where we can find resources? Why are we using, teachers pay teachers and these other paid resources instead of learning about OER? So that little bit of indignation and ability to push our programs is one of my favorite parts of it.
Very, very true. Now, lots of them still chose not to share. And a lot of this we found came back to their self-efficacy, that in reflecting during the first iteration, they just weren't comfortable sharing their work. Many of them were considered newer teachers with less than 3 years of experience. And as a new teacher, they still don't feel comfortable in their own practice yet. So they don't feel like their knowledge is valuable enough to share. Or as they were writing it, they didn't write it, they were writing it for their own classroom and didn't feel like others may be able to use it, to pick it up and adapt it for their classrooms, because maybe it wasn't explicit enough. So that's what we found in the very first one, that they lacked self-efficacy. They didn't think they weren't quite sure. A lot of them were trying new things with technology that they had never tried in their classrooms before and weren't sure how that was going to work out. And so that's why we decided in the second version second iteration to separate it out. So they're developing this resource. They can come back, revise the resource after their implementation, before they're invited to share openly, because a lot of them found that after I did this project, it was so powerful and the kids did so much great work that I do think that this is something valuable. I do think that this is something that others could take and implement in their classrooms, or maybe revise and implement. So after they saw the results of the work is when they felt like it was okay to share it at that point. And I think that's also why with the second one, you see that more people chose to share it with an open license, because they were invited to think about licensing it after they already implemented it. And so that's something that still gave them the choice, because I think there's valid reasons that they did not want to share, but still with that, yeah.
So in this process, Jennifer and I felt like we actually were a little bit onto something. So we went back and reflected on our process. And that's the book chapter that I'm going to talk about, is where we outlined the process that we used. So it's in this book called Open Pedagogy Approaches, which has loads of fabulous resources. And I like it also partly because it highlights the role librarians can play. So, you know, if you are looking for a collaborative partner, librarians like me are often really excited to work with faculty to help think through some of these things. And that's really what Jennifer and I did, was work collaboratively on her class. So we came up with the collaborative design framework as part of our work to think about what was the process we actually went through when we did this. So we looked at it and we said, you know, these are the steps we took. We kind of broke it down into 5 steps, which we'll go into, but we analyzed and classified the current assignment as it was initially. We considered what a meaningful OER contribution could be for the class. We selected the tools and repositories used. We designed intentional negotiations for openness, and then we finalized and reclassified the assignment. So in the first step, and this might look familiar from what Inés shared at the beginning from Wiley and Hilton, we looked at their kind of criteria for distinguishing assignments to say, what does it mean to actually be a renewable assignment? And when we looked at Jennifer's assignment, it was actually an authentic assignment already. So it wasn't quite disposable. It had value beyond the creator's learning. It wasn't just that students created an artifact and solely submitted it to her, but it also wasn't public and it wasn't openly licensed. So we thought about, you know, what are the steps we could take, and what does she need to do in order to get it to that point? Since that was her goal, was to create a renewable assignment. So it was right now sort of living in that authentic assignment category, that initial one. So when we thought about what could be a meaningful OER contribution, we really thought about what's useful for her course. What do teachers need? But when we're thinking about sort of students in any field, what could be a meaningful OER contribution in any field? You know, writing or editing Wikipedia articles, creating test banks is something we've seen other students do, creating assignments, creating tutorial videos. You know, some of my favorite ones are University of Windsor has a tool parade that teachers created where they have student created videos about different educational tools. So students can create guided notes through public annotations. Really, it ranges and it varies depending on what's actually useful in that discipline, what's going to be useful to students in that future course, and thinking through those goals. And there are probably, I'm sure, more options beyond this, but this was kind of ones that we brainstormed that we've seen or thought could be also useful. You know, creating their own textbook, remixing things, you know, there's powerful examples of students doing all of that. The next step we took was selecting the tool or repository to use. You know, Jennifer and I looked at a bunch of different ones that we have access to at CUNY. OER Commons was one that included K-12 materials. So that was why that seemed like the right repository for this. Some of the other ones that we have up there, you know, Wikipedia, I'm sure everyone is familiar with. Pressbooks is a popular open source tool for creating textbook or creating books. I think you can get an institutional subscription, or you might be able to create 1 or 2 on an individual one. Manifold is a platform for creating open textbooks and open monographs that we have access to at CUNY, that was developed through the CUNY Graduate Center. And so that was one that we looked at as well, and that we have students creating on. It's similar to Pressbooks in that it's an open book platform, but it has built-in annotation. So it functions a little bit differently. So it's got really great resources on it as well for adopting or adapting OER. Commons in a Box is a WordPress and BuddyPress platform that anyone can install. My colleagues over at City Tech, which is another CUNY campus, developed that, but anyone around the world can install it. They presented on it at OER, one of the OERs pre-COVID, and at OE Global as well. So you may have seen them if you were at any of those conferences. But if you just, Jennifer, if you don't mind popping in the link at some point, because I think it's linked in the, I can't get to it because of the slides, but those are, different options for where OER that students create can live. And there may be different ones available at your institution. There are institutional repositories. It really depends on kind of what you have access to and what digital literacy skills you and your students have, because all of these platforms require digital literacy skills, which are honestly incredibly useful for students as they're, graduating from their programs, to have these skills to use. Commons in a Box is a WordPress platform. Knowing how to use WordPress is a marketable skill that students can use. More than, I know how to submit something through my learning management system. So thinking through also what are the skill sets you want students to develop in your course can help you to select your tools and repositories. Another piece is designing intentional negotiations for openness. And this comes from Catherine Cronin, who some of you might be familiar with in open education, another person from Ireland like Colum. And she talked about when students make a decision, or anyone makes a decision around sharing, thinking through these dimensions of openness. Will I share openly? Who will I share with? Who will I share as? And will I share this? That it's not necessarily always the same decision, that it depends on what you're sharing. So she said, I love this quote, that it's always complex, personal, contextual, and continually negotiated. So when we think about that, we don't want to mandate that our students share openly, because at the heart of this is also student agency. And if we say you have to share this openly and here's how you have to share it, then we're taking that agency away from students and not empowering them in the way that we want to. So we looked at, in Jennifer's class, that's why she invites them to share openly, but doesn't require it. So having options for, allowing for pseudonyms, for example, or, where they share is really important as a piece of this work as well. And then in the final step, it's to finalize and reclassify the assignment. So thinking through, did it change from just creating an artifact and submitting it through the learning management system to really making it a publicly licensed artifact that has value beyond the creator's learning and is openly licensed? Has it made it through that kind of those stages? And in Jennifer's case, obviously it did. And that was, the goal. And when we've talked to other faculty who are looking at this, they think through, what are they doing at each stage? And so that's what we've been working on, is really, it also grows student understanding of the open licenses of copyright, which is really important because so many have no idea what their copyright is and what, what rights they have to their work or who owns their work, especially as they, go workplaces that have, intellectual property policies, being aware of what these kind of are, when Jennifer and I just presented for her class this semester, and very few students knew the intellectual policy properties of their district. Do you own something that you create, or does the district own it? Was a really interesting conversation where only a few knew if they had the rights to it and when those rights apply as well. So it's learning for the students that extends beyond their experience in the classroom. We have some related resources that we've linked to. We have the articles, we have the book chapter as well that we've done, other presentations we've given, the OER starter kit and workbook, if you're interested in just more background in both OER and renewable assignments, is linked in there. And then just some of our references as well. So I can stop screen sharing those so we can all, well, I guess so you can see all of us since we can't see all of you, and we can take some questions as well and have some discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Jennifer and Stacy. This was really interesting. Congratulations for your work and your lasting work with different iterations and many reflections and contributions. Thank you for sharing this framework. I think it's very useful. And let's see if there is any question from the audience in the chat. And in the meantime, I'd like to highlight some of the issues that both of your presentations have raised. One is the importance of including these assignments in the assessment. And in the Colum's experience, there was a difference when it was, even with a small percentage in some cases, but when it was something that was contributing to the final mark in the course. So that's something to bear in mind. Also, I think there are different challenges from going from one step to the other, from disposable to authentic, or having someone else involved in the process, or benefiting from the artifact that the students create beyond the teacher and the student themselves. And then going public, which has different challenges, and then the license issue, which is still very unknown, which is quite surprising because the OER movement has been around for many years, but still is something that requires some work for awareness. And so you have raised some different issues about these challenges at different stages, also reluctances from the students for going public or for being eager to learn more about the concept of OER and license. And also one thing that I consider very relevant, and someone also highlighted in the chat, is the role of the librarians. And you are very lucky, I have to say, because I think it's very, very relevant, this partnership between faculty and librarians for OER and repositories and all this world that opens a lot of different opportunities that otherwise faculty, if we don't have the proper training about that or awareness, it's very difficult to get. So thank you for being so active on that part, also on that collaboration. And I don't know if there is any question or comment. I don't see anything yet. But I wanted to ask you, or well, if you want to comment anything before, but to me it was interesting also that we have seen experience from undergraduate and postgraduate levels, which is interesting, and how the number of students affects this. And I make this question because many of us on the participants at Eden events work in distance or digital education, and sometimes we have very big number of students. So if you have any idea of how we can do this step forward or towards renewable assignment, even if slowly, step by step, but how we can consider the number of students, because I think in both cases, well, in some of Colum courses, there were hundreds of students, but in others, it was a more manageable number. So if you have anything to say about this, and if not, it's fine.
Yeah, I think Inés, if you can involve the students in peer reviewing, it can reduce the level of work, even to some extent. It can sort of, and it's interesting for them. And funny thing that we found when we're doing peer review is that the students are nearly always a lot harsher on their peers than you would be. They tend to be sort of very focused on the amount of work that goes into it, and I suppose as educators we're more in a framework to encourage people, but they're out to get them.
Maybe it's because my students are teachers. They do give each other really good feedback. I found that the peer review piece is really, really important as well. And without it, like, they were much less confident in the first iteration than they were with their work in the second iteration going into it, because somebody else had looked at it, a couple other people had looked at it. But what I find with the peer review is you need to give them an intentional protocol to follow in order to give that really good feedback. So what is it that we're looking at this for? What is it that I want you to discuss? So some intentional questions and like rubric or some sort of guide that can help them with that peer review. But I also think that in response to thinking about classes with large numbers, it's important to make sure that you're taking this step by step as well. And I think what we learned in iterating this project is that each time we've learned something new and thought about it in a different way to add in. So start small. You'll notice I started with a small shift. Instead of saying, okay, you have to create something, what can you find and use? And that has kind of grown, and they've taken more risks each semester as I've given them the option to take more risk. But it's still, with me in iterating the assignment, had to take it step by step. So it could be something small, like have students write their own assignment, or have students write their own questions to a test, and then you sort through them and put those questions out on the test.
Yeah, I would just add to that, you know, one assignment that comes to mind for a large number of students was Amy Nussbaum. I think when she was at Washington State, was that she was in a large intro psychology course, and she had the students find local resources on campus for mental health. And they put those in annotations, and then she added those to the textbook. So that was a small way that students then contributed and made the resource more useful.
Okay. Well, thanks. I agree. You have to be very careful and go step by step. This is also with I recognize a lot with Colum's experience that I think we both have raised doing something else that being a disposable assignment, but we have been gone so far as you on going public, just we remain within the class, and going public or repositories or licenses. This is something that we haven't approached yet, but so that's why it was very interesting to listen to people with different levels of experiences with these type of assignments. We don't have any question from the audience, so I think it's because everything was very clear. But the people were thanking you for your contribution. We have some minutes, and I just wanted to ask you, how do you feel about the term renewable, disposable? Do you like them, or have you found? And because I'm also thinking from countries like mine that we have another language, and there is not a very good translation for them in Spanish. Spanish, for instance. And I don't know. I don't find them.
I don't really like. Yeah, I don't really like disposable, but maybe sustainable. I don't know. Renewable has a better ring to it, but I don't really like disposable because it gives the feeling of that it's not concrete, or it's not robust. When it can be, you know.
Yeah, I've definitely had faculty say, well, but the students are learning from it, and isn't their own learning important in what we term a disposable assignment? And that does take away some of that value of, like, there is value in their own learning as well. So it's not really disposable exactly in that way, because that's what you hope, that students are taking something from it and carrying it with them beyond the class, and that does have value.
Yeah, I had the same sensation. So thank you for sharing your opinions. Well, we are right on time, so good. But if you want to say some final words for our audience, and this will be recorded, so maybe someone will listen afterwards. And I have seen we have a attendance from many different places. Some of them have introduced themselves in the chat. Just one last thing, I was thinking when you were presenting the repositories, I think that's very relevant, and it has to do with the librarian's work to facilitate where we can make the artifacts public. And well, I was thinking on the difficulties we may have with these repositories that are mainly in English. So for many of the participants in Europe, we have many different languages here, so it's an effort we still have to do. So if any librarian has any idea on this and can also help from the European audience, that would be welcome. So just turn for your final words if you want to say anything. And of course, thank you very much. And at the end, I will also announce some other events that Eden has organized in the coming weeks before we close.
Just Inés, to thank you for facilitating the discussion, and to say to the audience that everybody who's trying something new is always of interest to all of us, and certainly by all means stop us in an email and let us know. And it's something that maybe we can try ourselves, but I think the point that my colleagues stressed about trying things bit by bit and sharing with colleagues their experience is a really valuable one, and certainly we'll be looking at some of the ideas that they've been using, in particular, as Inés said, in terms of students making their material public in the future. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
I agree. Thank you so much for hosting this and getting this out there, because I think this is something that's not really talked about quite as much. We talk about OER, but the open pedagogy, and then even drilling down further, renewable assignments isn't really shared, which is where Stacy and I started to collaborate and say, okay, we see this gap that it's just not there. How do you create this? And so with that collaboration, that's my final words. Make sure you reach out to your open resources librarian, because they are a wealth of knowledge, and you just come to them with an idea and say, what do you think? How can we shift this? And they can help you do that. They know the repository, so reach out.
Yes, I would echo that. Reach out. No, I mean, and there are listservs of librarians. So if you don't have someone particularly at your institution, you know, there's a wealth of resources within the field and the community. So there are a lot of people to draw upon. I think this work is work that gets stronger with more of us working on it. And it, you know, if you're not collaborating, it can get kind of lonely. So finding a community and a collaboration is really important.
Great, thank you. So thank you again. And I think the framework you share will be of special interest to encourage people to think and design their own renewable assignments. And to finish, I will just share some events that will be happening organized by Eden in the next weeks or months. One is the Eden Digital Education Leadership Academy in Barcelona later this month. Also, the annual conference that the next year in June will be in Austria, in Graz. And you're welcome to attend. It's a really interesting event. And also, you know, Eden it's participating in the European Digital Education Hub with different type of activities. It's a very active agent there. So also you can join this platform. It's open and you just can register. And these are some webinars that will be organized within the European Digital Education Hub later this month about digital competencies and about evidence-based approaches to technology in early education in November and December. So also, it's not in the slide, but Eden App, we organize in webinars every month normally. And if you register to the Eden newsletter, you will get information when the newsletter is published in your email. So you are always welcome. And thank you very much also to the audience and who is live and also live connected, and to those who watch the recording. And thank you very, very much to Colum, Jennifer, and Stacy. It was really a pleasure to have both. I was very happy when you all accepted the invitation very, very quickly. It was really interesting, and I'm really happy. And now, after listening to you, I think you have opened our minds to everybody to explore this path about renewable assignments as OER. So thank you. Bye-bye.